I guess I'll start my message today telling a little story about a gentleman that it was a man who was embezzling and doing all kinds of unethical deals against older people and people that weren't too mentally astute. He was stealing money from them, in essence. And he finally got caught. And after he got caught, the judge was and he was convicted of the crime. The judge was so angry with him because he took advantage of older people and people that were, a little bit mentally challenged. He thought it was very cruel of this gentleman to do this. So the judge, in his sentencing, sentenced the man. He says, you've been cruel and mean and abused these people and stole their money, and you've been found guilty. And so I'm going to sentence you to 150 years in prison. Well, the man jaw dropped and he looked shocked and he jumped up and said, "Judge, I can't do 150 years." Judge said, "Sir, do the best you can." So, I'm sure, the thing of it is, and the point behind it is simply that the judge asked this man to do the best he can. Well, that's my subject today, and that is the question actually to you. Have I done my best? The question I think we need to ask ourselves, have we done our best? And I think in this day and age when everything is moving so fast, I just got drugged and I got drugged and kicked into the 21st century. I finally got a computer through the help of my sister. And it's like, I'm finding out all these things that you got to know about it and get virus protection and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is something, and I'm finding myself in a mode that is somewhat resistant to change. But what is happening is, because I haven't done this before, it's taking me out of my comfort zone. And see, when you come out of your comfort zone, sometimes that's when you can do your best work. And I'm finding now that I can already see some of the benefits of having a computer. As much as I resisted it, there's a lot of benefits to it. And that is the age we're in, folks, whether you like it or not. It's the 21st century is here, whether you participate in it or not. Now, we can either be a part of it and move forward, or we can fall back and stay out of it and then lose the benefits that are there. So I looked at that in relationship to doing my best. Is what are the characteristics that I have, or that any of us have, to show us that we are really doing our best? Because see, God deserves our best. And sometimes I think we, as not just as Christians, but as a nation, we get half-hearted about things. And we do just enough to get by. This is a common disposition, it seems. Let me just get by, where, I'm just doing just enough, and I don't come out of my comfort zone. So the number one characteristic I think we need to be aware of to check ourselves is that, do I come out of my comfort zone? If you are doing everything that's easy and everything that's comfortable, you're probably not doing your best. When you look at athletes and the people that train for the Olympics, you look at people that that excel in business, they generally go through a period where there's a lot of stress, a lot of strain, a lot of work. And they find out, though, by putting this extra effort in, they get things accomplished they would not have normally accomplished. The most exciting part they say about the Super Bowl last week was at one point it looked like the San Francisco was going to turn the whole thing around, because they came up out of nowhere after that little blackout they had, and they started scoring. And everybody thought, seemed to think, here they're coming out, and they started doing their best, but somewhere along the line they lost it again, and they end up losing the Super Bowl. But my point is that, are we willing to step outside of our comfort zone and get a little bit uncomfortable with what we need to do in order to achieve what God would have us to achieve, whether it's personal or involving the church? Are we willing to come out of that comfort level? I've had people tell me when you talk about health issues, and they'll say, well, I would take these vitamins and so forth, but I don't have the money. I've had people tell me that smoke up $80, $100 a month in cigarettes, but they don't have money for vitamins. It takes them out of their comfort zone. Or they say, I don't like salad, or I don't like juice. Why? Because it takes me out of my comfort zone. So you'd rather die with a debilitating disease than you would switch to salad and some juice. It takes you out of you. So are they doing their best? Absolutely not. And we have to ask that question about ourselves. Are we doing our level best? Am I out of my comfort zone with what I do? Turn with me to Ecclesiastes. I think everybody knows this scripture. We all should. We all been in the church long enough. Ecclesiastes 9, everybody knows this, verse 10. It says, whatsoever thy hands find to do, do it with thy might. It says, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave where thou goest. Guess what? We already know this, that dead folks don't get much accomplished. You know, I say that when I do workshops, I tell people the healthy can do much, the sick can do little, and the dead can do nothing. Which one do you want to be? He says right here, there is no activity in the grave. So whatever we're going to accomplish, folks, we got to do when? Now. Not tomorrow, but it's a now situation. So, but how does he say do it? With your might. Am I willing to come out of my comfort zone? If you're in your comfort zone, you're probably not doing your best. Okay, second point about finding out if you give your best or not, or you're doing your best, would be to look at a simple thing such as counting up the cost. You know, if a person says that they're wanting to do something and then they say, well, like I said with the situation with the vitamins, it costs too much. I've got to go to Walgreens or Walmart or someplace to go and get them. I have to order them. That's too much trouble. Count the cost up. Is it worth it to you to do your best? Is it worth it? People criticize you for different reasons and say, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. But they don't know what your goals are. People tell us that you shouldn't keep the Sabbath. The holy days are too much trouble. Have you counted the cost? Well, we need to do that if we're going to give God our best, or our best to whatever. We need to count the cost. Is it worth it to me? That's the question you have to ask. Is it worth it to me? If it's not, don't do it. Don't do it. But I don't know about you, the idea of living eternity in peace, no more sickness, no more death, sounds good to me. And that should be a motivating factor with us every morning that we get up, that God has given us a brand new day we never had before. We have not screwed that day up because it just started. And that's my prayer all the time, is that, Father, help me to do this day better than I did yesterday. You've given me a new day and I'm thankful for it. Help me not to screw this one up. But I've got to sit up and count the cost of whatever I'm going to do. Turn with me to Luke. Here again, the scriptures that we all know. Luke, the 14th chapter, and verse 27. He says, in verse 27, whatsoever, do it not, so whatever does not bear, whosoever does not bear the cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counted the cost as whether he has sufficient to finish it? So when you give your best, you take those things in consideration. What's it going to take to do this? If I want to buy a house, how much money do I need? How much insurance is going to be involved? You know, what's my interest rate going to be? You know, all these things are factors. How am I going to maintain it? Who's going to cut the grass? All these are things you have to count the cost. Oh, have we done that about our salvation? Are we willing to say, okay, what's the cost that we have to pay? Well, we got to keep the Sabbath. We got to pay tithes. We got to keep the holy days. Is it worth it? He said, why would you start to build a tower and you don't even have the money to finish it? That's not showing foresight. That cannot be your best. That's a half-hearted effort. How many people have left because they said the price is too high? But we have to count the cost, brethren, every day and every week and every hour and say, is it worth it to me? If it is, let me get busy and come out of my comfort zone and do what God would have me do. I think the reason why sometimes churches don't grow because people are in their comfort zone and they don't want to ask anybody to come to church. They don't want to invite anybody. What are you afraid of? What are you ashamed of? We are involved in the most important activity that's happening on this planet, as far as I'm concerned. Because we're talking about the future of the universe. We're not talking about the United States. I mean, you got politicians out here now where they're going all through all this about gun control. Now that those young children have been killed, they're reactionary. They should have done this stuff long time ago. Did they do their best? Absolutely not. Now that a bunch of kids have gotten murdered, then they say we got to get up off our duff and do something about this. But we're involved in the most important thing happening on this planet. And I'll tell you the truth, sometimes I forget that. And God has to remind me, there's nothing going on in this world more important than this work. Nothing. Because Christ is not basing his return on whether we get new gun laws. He's not basing his return on whether or not the United States does everything perfectly or the Congress does everything perfect. He's basing his return on the work of the church at large. Am I wrong about this? That's what my Bible tells me. So my question is, have we counted the cost? You can't give your best if you haven't evaluated what it's going to take you to get you there. You can't give your best because you don't even know what price you got to pay. I don't walk into a shoe store or a clothing store and say, just give me everything on the rack. And the guy says, how are you going to pay for it? That doesn't matter. I'm going to walk out of there naked because I'm not going to get anything. You got any money? No, sir, I don't have any money. I just came here and I want some clothes. He's not going to take care of me. He's going to say, how much money do you have to spend, sir? He wants to know. So have I counted the cost, or can I just order everything that I see? You know, people do that on QVC every day. They said I'm going to order everything in the world. They find out the card is got $500. They order $10,000 worth of stuff. It won't work. We got to count the cost. Then we're doing our best. And here's a final point. Turn with me to John. John 17 and verse 3. And I believe through 5 is what I got here. And this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. I have glorified thee on the earth. I have finished the work which thou hast given me to do. You're doing your best, brother. You don't start something and not finish it. We got to finish. We got to finish. If I give my best, you know, it's like, what good would it do a thoroughbred to take off at the Kentucky Derby? He takes out in front, and then he's dead last at the end of the race. It doesn't mean anything. You got to finish. At least finish. But you surely can't win if you don't finish. And God has entrusted us to do a work. He's entrusted us to live a life. And he's saying, I want you to finish this. And I'm giving you the power and the spirit and the ability to do it. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to quit halfway through? Is that your best effort? Or did you just get tired and give up? And he said he would renew your strength if you ask him. So do we get tired? Are we tired of being Christians? Are we tired of promoting the work? Because if we weren't, then something is wrong. Is it really our best to just show up for services? I don't think it's mine. I have to do more. And there's one more scripture I'd like to add in here. It involves the same thing. Turn with me to 2 Timothy. Chapter 4 and verse 7. And it basically, this is Paul talking. Well, I'll start at verse 6. For now I am ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. So he knew he was getting close to death. I have fought a good fight, not a weak fight, not a half-hearted fight, a good fight. He said, I have finished my course, and I have kept the faith. Can we say that? Are we fighting a good fight? To me, a good fight says that I need to be a part of promoting the work of God every single day in some kind of way, or thinking of a way to do that. This is the most important thing as far as I'm concerned, and maybe I got it all wrong, that's going on this planet, is to get his message out And so he can come back and straighten this whole mess out and give me something that I know I want, and I believe you all want too, and that's eternal life. So my motive is partially selfish. Anybody other than me want to live forever? I mean, I like it. That sounds good to me. The prospect of it sounds good. Because every day, brethren, we're racing against the clock because we don't know where death is. Every day. And he is going to take that stress away from us. That to me is exciting. All of a sudden, I don't have to worry about, will I have enough time for me and so to go do different things. Time is not an issue anymore as far as my life because I have it eternally. That major stress is gone. And the power he's going to give us, and we say this is not important, but we have to be willing to finish what we start. Are we willing to do that? If we are, brethren, I believe that we'll hear the words that Jesus Christ once uttered to his disciples. And he said something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, you have been faithful. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many. Do you want to become the ruler over many? Do you want to become successful in what God has given you to do? Then you have to ask yourself the question, have I done my best?
Well, real soon we will be looking at the subject dealing with the Holy Day season. Tomorrow, if you pay attention to those things, right after sunset, a few minutes, you'll see the new moon. Because we won't see it here, it's going to be raining again. So the next new moon is New Year's Day on God's calendar, which means 6 weeks from now, we will be observing the new covenant Passover memorial service. I believe it's March 24th on a Sunday, and we'll be at Shrewsbury because this place is closed on Sundays evenings. So, but today we are going to look at Daniel chapter 2. See what we can learn from Daniel chapter 2. Chapter 2 in verse 1. Now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. So if you remember, Daniel and them were taken captive when his father was still king. So this is the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign when he is ruling. And Daniel at this time, according to the commentators, is 18. So in the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. In other words, he had a nightmare. That's what he had. He had a nightmare. And he woke up and he was, scared, confused, wondering what the little bit that he could remember of his dream. He knew it wasn't anything that he liked because he wasn't sure what it meant, and he couldn't remember enough of it to make sense of it. So he's just, he woke up and he was troubled. Then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. I think the King James says Syriac, which is Aramaic, the language. And if you don't look into these things, you don't know this. At this point right here, Daniel chapter 2, all the way through the end of chapter 7, is written in Aramaic. Chapter 1, and these first 3 verses in chapter 2, and chapter 8 through the end of the book is all in Hebrew. And You wonder, well, why is that? And one of the reasons is that these chapters are concerned with the Gentiles, and the other chapters are concerned with Israel. And so that's the difference. He's in exile, he's in captivity in a Gentile empire, and so he's writing these things in their language because it concerns them. So it says, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation." The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, "My decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap. However, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation." They again answered and said, "Let the king tell the servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation." So they're playing this back and forth. You tell me the dream and its interpretation. No, you tell us the dream, and we'll tell you the interpretation. And the king's saying, well, any idiot can do that. Anybody can make it up and tell me what it means. But if you can tell me what the dream is, then I'll know you can tell me what it means. Because then I know that, you got something other than games that you play. There's something really substantial behind what you're doing. Well, the king answered and said, "I know for certain that you would gain time, because you see the decision is firm." So obviously they were hoping that something would come up which would distract him from this and get his attention. Whether it was, oh, we got this situation over here where the slaves are having an uprising, or we got a war going on over here, or this person over here is attacking, we got to go over that, something to distract him from, well, forget about the dream for now, we got things to take care of. That's what, they're going back and forth and trying to gain time that they won't have to deal with this situation. He says in verse 9, "If you do not make known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation." So he doesn't trust his wise men. He knows that they will play games and lie, hoping for the situation to change. We stall long enough and we, play around long enough, maybe something's going to happen. Because otherwise we're going to be in trouble. Well, the Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. It is a difficult or a rare thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh." So they had to admit some things only God knows. And whatever your God you want to mention, they don't live here. They're not here. I can't get in touch with any of them to ask them what's going on. I don't know how to get in touch with them. All I know is they don't live here. And the king, of course, that's not what he wanted to hear. These were his wise men. These were supposed to be the most intelligent people in the world. They were supposed to know everything about everything. So what's the problem? All I want you to do is tell me my dream. It seems like, any psychic could do that, right? Apparently not. So for this very reason, the king was angry and very furious and gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out, and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. So the king couldn't remember his dream, but he probably remembered that he thought it had to do with his kingdom. All he had to remember was little bits and pieces, but it didn't make any sense to him. So he is driven by fear and anger, and that means he isn't thinking right. So immediately, kill everybody, line them up, kill them. They're no good. What use are they? They can't tell me what I want to know. And so they're out killing the wise men. They're looking for Daniel and his 3 companions. And so, with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree from the king so urgent?" Then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So he told him, he saw all this commotion going on. Obviously, people were running and screaming, and the guards were running, chasing them, and he's saying, "What's going on? What's the problem?" And so he relates to him how he called all the wise men together and told them the king had a dream, and he wanted to know what the dream was and the interpretation, and they said they couldn't do it. And the king got angry and said to destroy everyone. So Daniel, he went in and he asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. Now, it's the way it's written, it's implied that he actually did that through a messenger. In other words, he didn't go up to the king and say, give me time to tell you. He sent message to the king for that reason, because later on it says he was in the presence of the king, and doesn't say that here. So it's implied that he sent the message somehow. So Daniel went to his house, and he made the decision known to Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So you got to put yourself in the scene and remember, these were 4 teenagers. 4 teenagers who are being sought out to be killed along with everyone else. And they're asking for time. They're going to go to God in prayer to seek mercies from God concerning the secret, so that they wouldn't be destroyed with the rest of them. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. It was not a dream. There's a difference between a vision and a dream. It wasn't a dream. It was a vision. If there was an urgent command to kill you, you probably wouldn't go to bed and go to sleep so you could have a dream. No, they were up and they were praying together, asking for God to intervene, asking for mercy. And as they were praying, the vision came to Daniel as an answer to their prayer. And then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. And Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and the seasons." God changes the times. That's exactly what we're seeing going on in the world right now. God is changing the times. You look through the Middle East and you had dictators that have been in power for 30 years, and they're falling one after the other because God is changing the times. We're getting into another time. You know, and you hear it on TV and radio and all the talk shows, and we get influenced by all that. People upset with the government and upset with the president and the way things are going on because, we look at it and we say, that's backwards. They shouldn't be doing, they should be doing this, they should be doing that, they shouldn't be doing this. But who is in charge? God is in charge, and he's changing the times, and he'll use whomever he will to bring about his purpose. That's where we're at. Yeah, we look at it, we say, if he doesn't change the time, how are we going to get from here to there? If everything keeps going the way it is, we're not going to get there. Time just keeps going on, and we never get to the kingdom. Something has to change. God changes, and that's what he's telling. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. Again, that's exactly what we're seeing in the Middle East. These dictators are falling. Yeah, it's creating problems. They say that over in Syria, where the rebels are fighting, trying to bring down the Syrian government, that the rebels, every town that they take over, they're killing all the Christians because they're extremist Muslims. And they're killing all the Christians every town they take over. So they're saying, well, who do we support? Well, you know who they're supporting. They're supporting the rebels because they want to bring down the dictator. But why? Well, who's in charge? Who's in charge? God's in charge. So he's going to do what he's going to do. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. And that's what he's given us. He's given us the knowledge, the understanding to know what's going on. The world is looking at, all this Arab Spring and all the stuff's going on. This is great. This is great. This is wonderful. Democracy going all over the middle. No, we know where it's going, what it's leading to. We know what it means. And we're just waiting for the whole picture to come together. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might, and have made known to me what we ask of you. For you have made known to us the king's command. So Daniel realizes, understands it was a group effort. The four of them got together, the four of them prayed, and the answer came to Daniel, and they were right there with him. So the answer came to all of them. It was just Daniel saw the vision. Whether or not the others saw the vision or saw anything or heard anything, it doesn't say. We don't know. But it was a group effort. Therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king the interpretation. So, it wasn't like he went to the king before time and said, give me time. Or he went to the captain of the guard and said, okay, now take me before the king. Obviously, there was a message sent somewhere, either to the king or to somebody underneath the king, that we're going to give Daniel and his companions some time. So he says, don't destroy the wise men of Babylon. Well, Daniel could have waited until the wise men were destroyed, depending on where we're at in line. He could have waited, get rid of some of the competition, but he didn't. He knew God is in control, God is in charge, God's going to do what he wants to do. Whether he's going to do anything with these guys or not doesn't matter. That's not my problem. My problem is to do what I know to do, which is I got the answer, now I got to go tell the king. I'm not supposed to wait around. So that's what he does. So then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king and said thus to him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah who will make known the king the interpretation. Well, what if he was wrong? What do you think would have happened to Arioch by taking credit for everything? I found the man. I. he would have been the first one to be non-existent. So he does make a little mistake, though. He says to make known the king the interpretation. The king wanted to know the dream. That was the primary thing he wanted to know. He wanted to remember the dream and then tell me what it meant. So the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, "Are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation?" He wanted to know both. And Daniel answered in the presence of the king. So here he is in the presence of the king. So obviously before he probably wasn't. "The secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king." Basically, he's saying, he's right here before the king, and he's saying, all of your wise men can't do it, can they? They can't tell you what you want to know. No, they can't. By the way, I looked up some of these things, and the magicians were those who repelled demons and evil spirits by incantations, or at least that's what they thought they were doing. You know, they say some, you know, the old, what's the stuff that used to be on Bugs Bunny? Hocus pocus, abracadabra, hocus pocus, you know, they used to go back and forth, crazy cartoon. Well, see, that's what they thought. They were going to say something, and yeah, it was going to make the evil spirit go away, like the evil spirit cared if you said anything to him or not. The astrologists were prophets who assumed to announce the will of heaven and predict the future. Sorcerers were wizards. Soothsayers were those that divided the heavens into divisions to guess at one's destiny from the place of the stars at one's birth, which is much like you see today. What is it? They tell you your horoscope in the newspaper or something, you know. That's the same garbage, okay? Like everybody that's born on this day, they're you know, they're all going to go this way, or all going to go that way, or whatever, you know. And the Chaldeans were priests, magicians, and there were 6 classes of Chaldeans. So you had all this, you know, the best of the best at their craft, but all it was so much guessing, playing, just putting together a bunch of numbers and trying to make them mean something, you know. It was nothing. Verse 28, he goes on to say then, "But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and your visions of your head upon your bed were these." So he says there is a God in heaven, and he communicates with me, not with your advisors. That's the bottom line of what he was saying. There is a God in heaven. He doesn't communicate with your people. "As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me because I have more wisdom than anyone living. But for our sakes who make known the interpretation to the king, that you may know, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart." So he says, not that I am wiser, but he was, because he went to God in prayer, and the others had nowhere to go, didn't know what to do. "And for our sakes," he says, he included all of them, all 4 of them, "for our sakes, that we would not perish, and that you would understand your dream. And you, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome."
The image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly, and actually should be the belly and the hips, not the thighs, because the thighs is part of the legs. But the belly and the hips of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor. And the wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now we will tell the king the interpretation. Okay, so again he says, we will tell the king. So he's including his three friends in everything that he's doing, because he's not going to cut them out of any credit. Because the bottom line was, the prayer that saved their life was a group effort. So verse 37, he says, you, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and he has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. So he's interpreting us. He's telling us what this vision was and what we're looking at. So he's saying that the Babylonian Empire, headed by Nebuchadnezzar, was the head of gold. And he says, but after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, which of course we know is the Medo-Persian Empire, which was represented by the chest of silver, which of course was inferior. And one of the reasons they go through the inferior, one's inferior, the next one's inferior, is because Nebuchadnezzar was a king. What he said went. He said, you're all dead, you're all dead. Nobody's going to defy him. They're going to do whatever he said. Where if you remember the Medo-Persians, if you remember the 6th chapter when we get there, Daniel, how the wise men went before King Darius and tricked him into making a decree about Daniel. Nobody could make any petition to any other god. And he signed a decree, and then they said, well, here, we found Daniel. He's making an intercession petition to his God, and according to your word, he's got to die. And the king couldn't do nothing about it because he signed a decree. It was the law of the Medes, and it couldn't be changed, cannot be changed. So he had inferior power because he couldn't change his own decision. He couldn't change his own mind. He had no power. Once it was written, it was that, and he couldn't do anything about it. So in that respect, it was inferior, besides the fact that it was inferior. And another third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth, and we know that was the Greco-Macedonian Empire. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. So of course that's talking about the one that came after Greece, which was the Roman Empire. And it was like iron. It marched all over everything, the Roman legions, and took over everything and crushed everything and left nothing. So we have the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, the Greco-Macedonian, and the Roman kingdoms are empires. Now, history tells us Daniel's prophecy is true. History tells us this. If you remember, grade school world history, you read about Nebuchadnezzar and the Persians and Alexander the Great and all these things, and how the one took the other one and then followed the other one and followed the other one. So history, grade school history tells us that Daniel's prophecies were true. Daniel got it from God, who gave it to him and Nebuchadnezzar to confirm it by two witnesses. and his word is confirmed out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Both of them had the same dream, because Nebuchadnezzar had it, he couldn't remember it, and it was given to Daniel, the same dream, confirmed by 2 witnesses. There is no argument as to any of this being true. History books and the literature of nations, together with archaeology and monuments still standing, all tells us that it happened exactly as it is written in Daniel. 70 years before the Medo-Persian Empire succeeded the Babylonian Empire, and hundreds of years before Alexander the Great and the Greco-Macedonian Empire, and then Rome. So if we want to know what and when, Daniel tells us. It's been proven true by history. There's no reason to doubt one word of it. All we have to do is understand it. Verse 41, whereas you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. The Roman Empire was divided in 395 AD, 800 years after this prophecy. It is still strong because of the iron, but is easily broken because now it's divided. And you know, you look up your history, you had your Eastern Empire and your Western Empire. The Roman Empire split, and that's what happened. You know, you can look that up in your history book. Haley's Bible Handbook has a little thing on it. So again, that happened. Verse 42. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. Those are actually some different words in there if you look them up in your concordance. So what it's telling us is, here we are at the end. We've gone from the head hundreds of years ago with Babylon, all the way through, all the way down to the toes. There's no place else to go. We're down at the bottom of the image. We got to the toes. Unless you got a heel spur or something, that's all. There's no more. So, the toes are from iron and from clay. But it's telling us here, so the kingdom shall be at the end. The one word partly actually means at the end. There's different words there, but they translate them all the same. So the kingdom at the end shall be strong and partly fragile. And of course we know that's what we're talking about is the end, because we're at the toes. There's no place else to go. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. Well, who's they? We're talking about toes. Well, that's who we're talking about, the toes. The toes will be mixed with the descendants of man, but they will not be united, just as iron and clay isn't united. You can't join the two. They're not going to mix together. You know, they're going to be, you can put them side by side, you can mix it all together, but they're not going to be together. They're not going to adhere to one another, they're not going to stick to one another, they're not going to cleave to one another, they're going to be separate, even though they're together. So, verse 44, and in the days of these kings. What kings? We were talking about toes. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. Kings. The toes are 10 kings mixed with different peoples. 10 kings, each from a different nationality, mixed together to form a kingdom or an empire. But they will not be united. They may appear to be, but in reality they appear strong, but are fragile. They are the smallest, the toes, and will reign the shortest time. Again, think back to the head. Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, reigned 70 or so years. And then the Medo-Persian Empire reigned for a couple hundred years. And then the Macedonian Empire and its successions reigned for a couple hundred years. And then the Roman Empire came in and reigned for several hundred years. And now we're down at the end times of the toes, the smallest part, and it's going to reign the shortest time. Just a matter of a few years. That's it. Whatever the final makeup will be, you will see a variety of nations like Spain, France, Germany, Poland, Hungary, Greece, Belgium, whatever they will be, all mixed together to form a United States of Europe, but they won't be united, just as you can't unite iron and clay. They're just going to appear that way. They won't be united. So in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and the interpretation sure. We know from history and past performance that this prophecy is certain and it is sure, with a guarantee that in the days of these 10 kings, Christ will return and set up the kingdom of God. There's absolutely no reason to doubt it. You have a whole history of it being true and accurate. There's absolutely no reason to doubt it. Now, turn over to Revelation chapter 17, because Revelation and Daniel go, as they say, like a hand in a glove. They go together in so many ways. Revelation chapter 17 and verse 11. The beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the seven, and going to perdition, or destruction. So that's the beast. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. So what are we reading? We're reading the 10 toes, and the mountain is smashing them. 10 kings that are going to make war with Christ, and Christ is going to overcome them, and he's going to set up the kingdom of God. And all these kingdoms are going to be destroyed and just blow away like they were never in existence when all is said and done. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. It's what? The seed of men mixed together, but not united. Iron and clay. Nations, tongues, all these different nations make all together to form an empire. But they're not united. There is problems. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast These will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. It's fragile. There's infighting. It's not united. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Who's in charge? Who's in control? God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose. You wonder why. Why are they doing that? It doesn't make any sense. Because God has put it into their hearts to do it, because that's what he wants done. To bring his plan to pass. Until the words of God are fulfilled. And what's that? Prophecy. That's what we're talking about. God is in control. He's going to do what he needs to do. He's going to what? Change the times. He's going to make things work according to his plan, according to his time, and that's exactly what's going on with us. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Reigns by deception. The false prophet deceiving the world by the signs he is granted to do in the presence of the beast. If you go over about 2 pages to chapter 19 and verse 20. Chapter 19 and verse 20, it says, Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. So, turn back a few pages into chapter 13. We'll just kind of complete the picture. Chapter 13, verse 1. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and the crown goes on a king. Okay. And on his heads a blasphemous name, not on the crowns. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. In verse 4 it says, So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who is able to make war with him? So, just like in Nebuchadnezzar, okay, who did they worship? They worship the beast. They worship the false prophet? No, they worship the beast. Okay. Then he opened his mouth to blasphemy against God and to blaspheme his name. Oh, I skipped verse 5. And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue 42 months. See, we're down to the toes. It ain't going to rain that long. It's a very short reign. 42 months is with plus or minus the months beforehand for him to actually get the war started, as we read in Daniel 11, at the time of the end with the king of the north and the king of the south. So now let's go back to Daniel chapter 7 and try and remember what we just read. Daniel chapter 7 for a couple of verses here. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1. And the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and his visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Just the facts, man. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, the Mediterranean. And four great beasts came up from the sea, each one different from the other. The first was like a lion. We just read that, Revelation 13. The beast, the end time beast, was like a lion and had eagle's wings. And I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly another beast, the second like a bear, and it was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said to it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. What did we just read about the beast at the end time that he saw rising up out of the sea? It was like a lion, like a leopard, and like a bear. So that beast incorporates all the best features of these other beasts. The mouth of the lion, the feet of the bear, the speed of the leopard. He has all these features, the end time beast. And after this, I looked in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, and it had huge iron teeth. Who's got the iron? Rome. Had the iron legs. So it's got iron, it's got the mouth of the lion, it's got the feet of the bear, speed of the leopard. That's the end time beast. It's got all these things. Huge iron teeth, and it was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So we know what we're talking about. We're talking about the 10 toes, which was interpreted by John as 10 kings, and which Daniel then gets a later vision, which tells us the same thing, that it's 10 kings, 10 horns. Same beast at the end time. So that's what we're seeing. So let's go back then to Daniel chapter 2 and finish up with verse 46. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. The king literally worships Daniel. Gets off his throne and lays down prostrate before him and commands them that they offer him an offering. Nebuchadnezzar, all he knew is he had a nightmare, and it really bothered him. And it had something to do with his kingdom, but he couldn't remember it. Nobody could tell him. And here's Daniel comes up, 18 years old, with his 3 friends, which were probably 17. And they stand there and they tell the king, this is what you saw, this is what it means. And the king just totally aghast, falls down. In his mind, Daniel's a king. Daniel's a god. That's what he's thinking. The king answered Daniel and said, truly, your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. Oh boy, you know how they were upset. Here's an 18-year-old teenager in charge of all of us because he could do something we couldn't do. You know what they're thinking? How do you do that? How do you do that? We got to keep an eye on him. Have dinner with him and see what he can, talk to him, see what you can get out of him, you know. That's the way humans are. They want to know how he did that. It had to be a trick. We got to learn that trick. That's what they want to know. And Daniel didn't forget his 3 friends. He petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat at the gate of the king. So Several things we learn from this chapter 2. God will use whoever he wants to for his purpose. And in this case, a Gentile king. He can put into your mind a dream that you thought was just a dream, but a dream that has significant meaning for all of mankind if they want to read it and understand it and know what it means. 4 teenagers can unite in prayer and receive an answer, even a vision with appearance and sound, with video and audio, like watching a movie in 3D, right in front of them. Technicolor, surround sound, the whole thing. But it's real, but it's not real. It's like 3D. You want to reach out and touch it, but you can't. It's in the TV. God can and did foretell world history for 2,500 years in the future, and then bring it to pass and make it happen. From the time of Daniel all the way through all the empires down to where we are watching the 10 toes get ready to come together. 2,500 years. And then bring it to pass and make it happen. And just as sure as all of this history, we are waiting for the days just ahead of us for 10 kings in Europe, that last part of the Roman Empire. So with that and all the other prophecies that we read in Revelation and elsewhere that are all going to come to pass, including the return of Christ to set up the kingdom of God. It's all right there in one chapter. It's all there. We see it taking shape, and it takes time. But what we know is God is in control. He will do it according to his time, according to his purpose. People are going to be used and won't even know they're being used. It's going to happen. Guaranteed. We just read it. Looking at the website this morning, these things are in the news today. Got it from the website this morning. Garnett Armstrong. The King of the South is progressing. Iran's leader visits Egypt for the first time in over 30 years. Because 30 years ago, 33, 34 years ago, they signed a peace treaty with Israel. And Iran got the Ayatollah back out of hiding in France or wherever he was. And the Shah was gone. And times were what? Changing. Now they're changing again because God is changing the times. They're positioning themselves to see how we're going to farm this King of the South. Iran doesn't want to be left out. They recognize that Egypt has got all this power and control and is able to pull the wool over the United States because we're still sending them ammunition and weapons because we still think they're a good guy. But guess what? God's in control. He knows what's going on. 9 major earthquakes in the last 5 days. Violent seismic and volcanic nature. 44 volcanic eruptions in January, last month. There were only 77 in the whole year of 2012. We've already gone over half of that in 1 month. ominous changes in the South Pacific. The planet is now experiencing a major geological crisis and showing some indication of worsening. Gee, did we ever read that in Matthew 24? Let me see. Oh yeah, earthquakes. Yeah. That's what we're reading. These things are coming together. And if you haven't seen it yet, Tiffany sent me the article, and then it's on the website today. And the headline is, Israel seems to have sold Jerusalem to the Vatican. A seat for the Pope at King David's tomb. Yeah. And in the room where they think they had the Last Supper. And it's a great big long article, so I didn't bother to print it out or to read it. But it's at the website. Or you can just go to the website, click on it, and the whole article comes up. It's in the news. They are making treaties, pacts, agreements. It's all coming. It's all coming to pass. It's all coming together, little by little by little. All we got to do is keep our eyes open and watch it, know it, understand it, know what it means, what it doesn't mean, how it affects us or how it doesn't affect us. And we'll see what the situation is. I was listening to a radio program last week, I think it was, on the way home from church, and they were talking about, and you've heard this, Mark has mentioned it many times, the electronic magnetic pulse weapon. Basically what that is a nuclear bomb that they set off high in the atmosphere, 150 miles up. They don't drop it on the city, they set it off in the atmosphere 150 miles up, which does two things. It makes it hard to detect and hard to do anything with at that altitude. Which is why they're so leery of what North Korea is doing, because they're saying, they're sending up this intercontinental ballistic missile to launch a satellite into space. But if that's got a nuclear warhead on it and it goes into space and they decide to drop it over the center of the United States at 150 miles up with a large enough megaton, they say, from all their estimates, from coast to coast, California to New York, from up in Canada down to inside Mexico, we'll all be back in 1800. No motors, no electricity, no lights, no power, no hospitals, no ambulance, no gasoline pumps, no nothing. One bomb. The technology's there, and that's what they're looking at. What's going to happen to knock us out of the running to prevent what's going on in the world, where God's going to bring all these things to pass? We know we're not going to stop it. We're either going to be a part of it, or we're going to be so dismantled that we won't be able to do anything about it. So, one of the things, of course, they were saying was, the average grocery store only has food for 3 days. I mean, you know that when there's a snowstorm coming, you go to the store and shelves are empty already. You got any of this out back? No, we're expecting a truck tomorrow. Of course, they won't make it because of the snow. So, you do what you can. That's why Mark says, do what you can to prepare for yourself. You have to decide what that is, what you can do, what you can't do. But, it's just like the woman was on the news yesterday. They interviewed her and said, what do you think about this storm coming? Oh, it's not so bad. I got my flashlight, and she says, I got some food, so I'll be all right. I said, yeah. until the power goes out and it gets down below zero and you have no heat because your furnace runs on electricity, it's not so bad until it happens. Then what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Well, just remember, God's in control.